Hello friends, the sun is shining, it's a beautiful day. You know, we're having an early spring, and usually I would say I'm not ready for it, but my body says I am. It feels good to get outside and do things. And the weather is hitting so different this year than it has previous years. We are over 20 days ahead where we should be, but that means the garden, it's time to do certain things. Now, I have been saving tulip bulbs I got on sale last year, and instead of potting them up in the fall and overwintering them, I do it a different way. So we're gonna go over that. We're gonna see what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna pot them so I can enjoy them here this spring potted up. Kip, my Frenchie, is gonna join us, of course, for all of it. And I'm gonna show you how unplanned and kind of just like spur of the moment I plan my garden flower beds sometimes. So on the back side of my house, last year I remodeled my second floor. They had to add a air conditioner unit on the outside of the house. It's an ugly area, so we're gonna go talk about the ugly side of a house, how I'm going to start working on it today, but it's gonna be a process. And I want you to see, because guess what? It's not a perfect process. It's just how I work through things. I'm not someone that always plans it out. There are certain areas where I draw everything up. There are other areas where I don't. And that's okay, we can do what we want in our own yards, right? That's what today's all about. Let's get started. To start today, a lot of people like to force tulips in the spring, and what many people do, and I think is probably the correct way, if we're gonna be honest, is to plant them in containers if you're not gonna put them in the ground. But if you wanna enjoy them in containers in the spring, plant them in the fall, keep them in a cold area, sometimes cold packing depending where you're gonna put them. Don't let them get fully below freezing over the winter because that can rot the bulb, but keep them around that 55, 40 to 50 kind of degree Fahrenheit temperature. I go a little bit different route. If I find some tulip bulbs in the fall that either I don't plant or I want to save them for spring, I just keep them like I buy them and then keep them cold because they need those chill hours over the winter. That's what a tulip needs. That's why we put them in the ground. They stay cold when they get planted at that correct depth of 6 to 8 inches depending. And so instead what I do is I keep these cold. I keep them in an unheated garage or in a shed depending how warm or cold of winter we have. So you can see these I've kept. They're just beginning to sprout. It's time to pot them up and enjoy them for the spring. So that's what we're gonna do. So I have some Beauty of Spring and some Red Madonna ones, and what I have are just 2 containers. You know I love Wakefield pottery. These are gorgeous pottery, and what I can do with these now is transport them. So the reason I don't do this in the fall is sometimes just time, but also then I don't have to lug heavy containers around. A lot of people also put them in plastic containers and then drop them into others. You can do that, do whatever works for you. But the great way of doing it this way, it's really quick and simple to store them because you just keep them in their containers. You can even put them in the fridge sometimes, depending. You don't want them to get too cold. But now you just want to plant them at the same depth you would outside. So I have all-purpose potting soil. I'm using my normal go-to, my Espoma all-purpose. You really just want to be sure when you're planting anything in a container you have the right soil. And so you want all-purpose potting soil so it drains correctly and is the right texture for what you're planting. So I'm going to make sure these are somewhat full. I'm putting about 12 bulbs per container. So I'm going to open them up and plant them all here. So instead of just having to dig out the soil, I only put in soil up to the right depth. And now I'm just going to go around and set each bulb in place. Important part if you haven't planted tulips, and don't feel bad if you haven't, it's easy. The tip, they don't always have a green tip. These do because they're starting to force out. The tip goes up. You can see the root end where the roots were. That goes down into the soil. So I'm packing these in fairly tightly because when they come up and want to bloom, I want them just to be full of beautiful blooms. I don't want them just to be scraggly and have a couple blooms. I want them to have lots of beautiful foliage and lots of blooms. So once I have that in there, and you can see, they're all just set in there. And this is, if you want to do this in the fall and you have plenty of time, do it. I just find I often run out of time with my normal outdoor chores. I put a lot of soil in this one, so we're going to transfer some over into here. But I find I just don't always have time. So my thing on gardening is I try to over garden. I do probably too much for what one person can do, but I want to do it, so I make it work for how I can make it work, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm putting the soil in, leaving it about 8 inches down. So the important part is, once these are planted, potted up, ready to go, you want to watch the temperature. So like where I'm living now in Southeast Iowa, we're having a very warm, we're very ahead as far as weather goes. So I'm not worried about leaving these out, and I'll probably put them on the north side of my house so they stay somewhat cool and don't come up too quickly, because I usually wouldn't expect any tulip until April, and oftentimes late April at that. I live out in a very open area. If you live in town, you could have a microclimate. That could be different. So on these ones, I'm putting them around in the same way. Now you can check if you have a bad one. Sometimes they will be a little rotten, just like in the fall if you buy them. But you know what, if the green is pushing out, I'm still gonna pot them up and plant them because they still have a good chance of having a beautiful bloom. So I'm gonna set these right on my back patio where nothing is out yet. That's usually where I fill up all of my shade-loving plants I save, all my ferns and beautiful things like that. It's empty right now, and then I will put these by my front door when they're starting to want to bloom. I could put them up there right now, but with the sun and warmth on the south side, that could speed them up too quickly. So here these are gonna sit on my back patio. They're protected. I am gonna make sure to water them. So I'm gonna water them once now. When those greens start coming and popping through the soil, I'll start watering them like a regular container. There's no roots on a bulb yet. Until those greens pop through the soil, they're not gonna be sending roots out, so you don't wanna overburden them with water because it can rot the bulb. So until then, I'm gonna let these sit. They're gonna be happy, and soon enough, hopefully, probably not till April, but maybe soon around, we'll see when these actually happen, we'll actually be able to see some beautiful blooms, and it was so simple. So I'm gonna be honest, in the past I would have really not liked showing the side of my house because I think it's ugly. You have, you know, internet cables coming up, you have downspouts in weird spots, I have conduit for this new air conditioner unit that I wasn't planning for my second floor. I have a big radon pipe that emits that gas from the basement. So all those things. And they had to rip out a couple things last year to put this unit in, and I had some really nice boxes that I tried to save, and the timing of when they needed it ripped out, and I didn't know they were gonna need to be ripped out, just did not work out well. So we're gonna talk about this side of the house. You can see there is one boxwood right there, kind of out of place. It's this green mountain, it's beautiful. I have one more green mountain at some point here I'm gonna put in. But what I wanna show you is how spur of the moment I'm doing this. So a few minutes ago, I took my edging tool, which you can see right here. Right there is my edging tool. And it's just my half moon edger. You can see the ground is really nice and moist and perfect. And I am just eyeballing, do you see that line? That's my edging tool going in and knifing a cut line. So what I want to do is extend this bed out so I have more space between the air conditioner units to put some shrubs. And same up here. You can see I'm extending it out because right here is where my furnace vents from. And if I put a boxwood too close there, any shrub, it kills it over the winter because it's heat and air coming out over the winter. So I have to stay clear of that. So I want to bring this bed out. And today is the first step where I'm going to remove some grass. And you can see this line. Look how, I know. Guys, it's not all pretty here. It's also just real. That's what it is. Someday I'd like to dig in my downspouts. We'll see if I get that done. But you can see here this line is bringing this whole bed edge out. I like to eyeball this. Another way you can do this is lay garden hose, water hose out in the shape you want. You can spray paint a shape. I eyeball it and I go with it as I go. So what I'm going to do is start just cutting out this sod, putting it here so I can reuse it if I want to and patch it in places. I'm going to watch Kip. He's going to play with his Frisbee. And hopefully we'll start on a new bed. When I have my line cut with that half moon edger, it gives me about a 4-inch deep kind of trench. I then take a spade, a flat spade usually, it depends what I have around, and I just go through with a sharp spade and start lifting the sod. Now you can rent sod cutters. This is a pretty small area. While it looks like a lot of work, you know, renting one is a lot of work too, to go get it, you know, to pay for it. So what I can do here is just nicely lift these pieces and then use them at different places in the yard because it's growing grass. People pay for this. Now, what's the best thing to do is when you have good moisture in the ground. In the spring, we hopefully have good moisture, which we do right now. So it's pretty easy to work this blade under and quickly lift it out. See how quickly I'm able to lift it out? So I'm gonna work down this line, extend the bed, and then decide if it's enough. Because this is the best part of working in your house in your own yard. You can do what you want and decide on the go. So I have all the sod removed. You can see the piles of it that I'll either get the gator or put some of them on my garden cart there. Now what I did go through and do then was take my half moon edger when I was done and make a nice big trench. That's usually how I edge most of my beds. And honestly, I usually only have to clean it up maybe every other year. So this would be the year that I will clean up the front bed. That was done about 2 years ago, but you can still see that nice edge. So that half moon edger can keep a really clean line. Now what I might go in here and do too is slightly take out a little bit more up in there. I just feel like it could come out a little bit further. But what I'm doing now is just placing some plants. So a couple of these boxwood are ones I moved from a different location. So you can see they are early spring, late winter, when things are still dormant, but the ground is soft enough to get into. You can see that root ball, I'm able to get a lot of soil with it, and it's holding on because of the moisture. That's a great time to move things. They're not getting out their big spring growth yet, so they're still somewhat dormant. So while they're dormant, it stresses them the least to move them. And now I'm gonna treat them like a new plant. Just like I've planted boxwood before, gonna dig a dig hole, gonna put biotone in, some plant tone and get those ready. I have one new green mountain, and I'm putting it right here only because of the stuff on the wall. I want it to grow larger, hopefully 4 foot at some point, and cover that. You know, this is an area that you don't see really from the road. You don't see it when you drive in, and I don't see it from any window. So more what this is for is just foundational planting that will have some nice year-round effects. What I am doing, if you notice, is pulling about every other, so I'm gonna have it be a zigzag pattern, but I'm giving about 4 foot behind some of the boxwood, and I'm gonna put some large ornamental grasses back there to really fill in. I want this to be very just filled with green textures. I can't see it, so I'm not worried about blooms, but I just want it to be full so the ground is covered, but also give some nice interest. So I'm thinking Karl Forster grasses back here. We'll cover those in a different video. I'm finishing up with the last boxwood, which is a transplanted one, and I want to show you how the transplanting is somewhat the same process as if it's brand new. And the reason I say that is you're displacing those roots and stressing them slightly by cutting them from where they were growing to now in a new spot. So when I dig a hole, I again do it ample size, maybe not quite twice as big, but good sized. And I just do my normal biotone and plant starter. So unlike in the spring when we're just fertilizing things, since I'm transplanting these roots, it's good to make sure you give them a good base with 2 products like this that really help them get acclimated in this space. Now, last year I had a good dose of compost from my pile that I put on here and worked into this bed. So I'm not amending. You can always amend soil, at least up to 50% with something like compost. Compost is not soil, it's organic material that enriches your soil. Now what I'm gonna do is put in this transplanted one, and it's a pretty big one, but you can see it very quickly goes in the hole. Now I'm making sure to stay far enough away from my exhaust pipe to my furnace, because like I said, I don't want it to kill out this boxwood in the winter, which can happen. And then obviously it's not looking too good here otherwise. That's because it's still early. I don't have the plants here I'm gonna put in. It's gonna be lots of grasses, like I said. Lots of Karl Forster grass, which is tall, upright, will look nice kind of in the background here. Towards the front, I might do some all gold Japanese forest grass. It does really well for me here a little to the south where it gets a lot of dappled sun, mostly shade. Out here, I might have to do more of a prairie grass, drop seed, something like that. It's more of a fountain grass for lower grasses. And I also dug up some different stockies. This is Helen von Stein, lamb's ear. And that does really well here too, because it gets some nice sun and it really can just grow and almost be a ground cover. So kind of a mixture of those things I really think are what's gonna look good here. So I have more work cut out for me. I have more to add into this space. We're gonna really talk next time when I do more on this area, which might not be for a little bit when plants start coming into nurseries. We're gonna talk more about what I'm gonna use around these units to cover them up and pretty much just give them some visual interest as opposed to an eyesore. It's things we all have, it's things we all deal with, and that's what this area is really about. Filling in with mostly stuff I had, and now hopefully in the coming months making it look a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more natural, just so it blends into the area. So I hope that kind of gives you a starting point for where I'm going and hopefully where we're gonna be headed.